Origin Gen, Suji reaction. This is 1918 flu pandemic. Fighting the ghost. Extra history part 4 by the channel Extra Hertz. Philadelphia gets hit the hardest. New York fares somewhat better, but everyone is trying to keep hush-hush about a pandemic that still found its way into children's rhyme. Influenza. Yeah, okay. Around obviously World War One is going on, and everybody, all the government, military is trying to keep it at hush-hush, right? And obviously medical experts are telling the mayor that stop the parade, rally, whatever, because it would spread a lot, but they're ignoring that too. Look, I get it that if World War One is going on, you have to keep it at hush hush from the public so panic doesn't rise up. It's not good for anyone. I understand that, but that is only understandable if you're doing something for the public, right? Seeing public's health as first. Then if you keep it hush hush, I understand that. But if you're just thinking like, oh, we need troops, so that means that we're going to ignore medical staff because that's how the world works. If we close our ears and close our eyes, the virus doesn't exist. No, medical experts are telling you the virus is real, it will spread, stop the rally, stop this. Don't ask for new troop, otherwise it will be more people will be stuck getting take care of the troop than actually helping in the war. If you ignore that, that's just fucked up, right? That's what happened here. And I guess in the rally, people are gonna catch lots of viruses. It'll become an issue. So let's watch this one.
September 28th, Philadelphia. The Liberty Loan Parade is in full swing. Thousands march in the streets. Hundreds of thousands watch. Few know that health officials have pressured the mayor to cancel the event. Women wave flags. A child sits on his father's shoulders. The crowd falls silent for a simulated bombing run. Airplanes buzz overhead. Anti-aircraft guns fire blanks into the sky. The crowd, necks craned, tries to imagine what it's like to be in mortal peril. Little do they know, they already are.
Oh, I get it. So that was some military exercise to show the public like how it would be if they get invaded, huh?
The flu was already burning in Philadelphia, but after the Liberty Loan Parade, it explodes. 3 days later, the hospitals start to fill. With the war sapping medical professionals, there aren't enough doctors or nurses, and the hospital staff starts to die. Though colleagues fall around them, doctors and nurses stay at their posts. Some in private practice make 60 house calls a day. Over 1,000 die that first week. And in
See, this is one of the things that I just thought of. I just get reminded of this, especially the last year. People think that human nature somehow, it's some kind of cynical view people have about the human nature, like how everybody's greedy, everybody's survivalist, everybody just think for themselves, right? First of all, with what happened with the medical staff, right? Like around this time, like he said, like everybody was dying left and right, but medical staff saw that as duty. Even if they get infected and die in the process, they have to be there. Just for the sake of people. And they did. Same thing happened last year. Everybody was just scared getting out of their houses while all this, civil servants basically doing their job knowing it could be really disastrous for them. So, this kind of things really, give me hope for the humans basically. Like this mentality, like, whenever there is a massive issue, people will always run for the survival, and everything will go like Mad Max type of thing. I don't think that, right? Because when real pressure comes, the people like that really rise up for the sake of good of everybody. Same thing you see in the military. Yeah, there is lots of people who get, what is the word for that? Government asks you to fight for the military draft. Lots of people get drafted and lots of people, also enlist for the sake of country. So, this kind of a news panic media that we live in today, where news constantly just tells you about horrible things that are happening in the world, constantly just tell you like how, it's all cynical, it's all dark, everybody just will think for themselves. That's not true.
3 weeks, the death toll approaches 5,000. The dead quickly begin to overwhelm Philadelphia. Morticians post staff at hospitals to free up beds the moment victims expire. If a patient starts turning blue, nurses tag them for the morgue. It saves time. But the morgue is out of space and refuses to accept more bodies. Workers keep doors and windows open to dissipate the stench, and fluid runs out the door and into the gutter. The Catholic Church gets involved, mobilizing clergy to help clear the backlog. When the priests enter the morgue, they find 400 bodies.
Damn.
They're everywhere. Lying on desks and stacked in corners, the building is at 12 times its maximum capacity. Things are no better at graveyards. Pre-burial vaults are full. The city has run out of coffins and wood to build coffins. People use wheelbarrows and potato sacks to bring loved ones to the cemetery, then leave them there. Once again, the church steps in.
Yeah, by the way, do you know what's the difference between graveyard and cemetery? I recently just found that out. Graveyard basically just means that there is a church nearby. It's church's graveyard. Cemetery just means it's just where people bury their dead. There is no church around. I always thought those are the same thing with a different name, but no, there's a distinction there.
Hiring a construction crew to dig trenches with steam shovels. They stack the coffins 2 deep while recording exactly where each person is buried. At night, citizens hear them reciting Latin prayers over the mass grave. But that took time to organize. And for weeks, thousands are not buried at all. With hospitals, morgues, and cemeteries refusing to accept corpses, people have to live with the dead in their homes. And many families are so ill that they can't move a corpse at all and simply sleep, eat, and live next to the deceased. Weeks in, Philadelphia leaders finally rent a warehouse as an overflow morgue.
Yeah, I said in one of the videos that there was a case in Italy, right? Somebody posted a video that became so famous, but he was standing in the room where his sister died for days. Her body was just there on the bed while he was filming. Like nobody's coming to pick her up, nothing. She's just here. It's been days. This feels really similar of that. Damn. It's really effed up that, when you see some historical event like this, like a century ago, some after historical event, you always have this mindset like, oh, this happened, a long time ago, right? Time around that was really fucked up. Now watching this feels really surreal, like we just went through something similar of that. Even though the, death toll are not similar, some of the effects are really similar. Like he said, people is living with the dead bodies in the houses because, people can't just come and take them out or whatever. That really happened last year.
Organized teams of policemen and priests circle the city, collecting the dead in horse-drawn carts. Philadelphia would be the worst hit city in America, with 500,000 cases. By the end of October, the city government almost ceased to function, and private citizens stepped in to run the response. People volunteered cars as ambulances and worked as dispatchers at medical phone banks, a primitive 911. But just up the coast, it was a different story. While the head of New York's Board of Health had been slow to respond, the city had experience fighting epidemics like polio and tuberculosis. The Public Health Service had a major presence and experience screening and quarantining people at the Port of New York. In fact, the port had started quarantining ships the moment reports of the flu arose on the Western Front. But the war made full quarantine impossible. The city instituted laws criminalizing spitters and people who failed to cover their mouths when they coughed or sneezed. They posted notices urging the sick to stay home under voluntary quarantine, report illnesses to a doctor, and they called for people to wear gauze masks. The Board of Health surveyed neighborhoods to track the spread. They set up medical centers that dispatched doctors and nurses on house calls. And most importantly, they convinced businesses to stagger working hours and shopping times, reducing crowds on public transit. But even in New York, the press continued to minimize the outbreak in order to protect morale. And it was the same in cities and towns across America, even as the disease spread west. Newspapers would claim there was nothing to worry about one day, and then the next announced that all public gathering places were closed.
Look, when it was, the virus was just spreading in the military and they didn't try to, cause panic by not telling people, that was a different thing. But now if it's spreading through the public areas, right, people are getting sick in the cities, press does this for the good of the people, now that's like crossing the line, right? There's a very thin line you have to walk between when it's okay to suppress things and, not cause like, some kind of a suppression of free speech or whatever, and when you should just, tell the people. So if it was just in the military, while it was spreading through the military, it was not spreading through the actual cities. You understand that it's war going on, panic could cause a real issue with all the military efforts. I understand that, but when it's spreading through the cities where people can get infected just walking through the street, that is the time where you have to tell people. That's your duty now, right? At that time, you can say for the good of the people, right? I'm not going to tell them. It's like saying that I'll lock somebody in their house and I will not let them out for the good of them because people die outside with accidents and things. What do you mean by good of them? You have to tell them now. If panic happens, then happens. This is a real issue now. People can get infected just walking out the street.
The result was uncertainty and fear. Everyone knew newspapers were covering it up. People could see the obituaries. They saw the Red Cross ads begging for nurses. Families tracked the flu coming down the rail line or highway via letters and articles buried in the back pages. It was in the next state, the next county, the next town, and finally next door. In this climate of mistrust, rumors grew. One conspiracy theory claimed the flu was a bioweapon released from German U-boats off the Atlantic coast. Another said that the German-owned Bayer Corporation had poisoned its aspirin with the disease. A rumor ran around Phoenix that dogs carried the disease, and as a result, Arizonians killed thousands of strays and pets. And in San Francisco, a policeman shot a man who refused to comply with new flu mask laws. Evangelist Billy Sunday claimed the disease was a punishment visited upon a sinful nation and held a mass prayer meeting to end the epidemic. Several in the crowd collapsed of flu while praying for deliverance. Whole towns isolated themselves, hiring armed guards. The flu got in anyway, arriving with mailmen and milk trucks. Shops began asking customers to shout their orders, then leave the money on the doorstep. The owner would take the money and leave the goods. Children distilled this paranoia into a jump rope rhyme, one that captured the sense of an unwanted visitor invading the home.
I had a little bird and her name was Enza. I opened up the window and influenza.
The country needs something to stop this.
What? What was that?
Doorstep. The owner would take the money and leave the goods. Children distilled this paranoia into a jump rope rhyme, one that captured the sense of an unwanted visitor invading the home.
I had a little bird and her name was Enza. I opened up the window and influenza.
The country needs something to stop this nightmare. At the Rockefeller Institute, they isolate Pfeiffer's bacillus in mid-October, and the Army Medical School begins the process of injecting it into horses, drawing their blood, and isolating the antibodies for a vaccine. By October 25th, the vaccine is ready. Express trains rush deliveries to the West Coast to protect troops and shipbuilders there. They've made enough to vaccinate the entire U.S. Army and its civilian employees, but only enough for the Army. For the duration of the war, the Rockefeller Institute was a military organization, and therefore their work focused on the military. No matter how much mayors and governors begged for vaccine, they wouldn't receive a single vial. It took a parallel civilian effort to provide relief to the public. At the New York Hygienic Lab, William...
Damn. See, thoughts like that feels foreign today, right? I mean, whether it's everybody is just global in a sense because of social media, internet age, whatever, the backlash are a real thing nowadays, right? Anybody just doing a bit of inhumane thing and people just lose their mind. That's the case, I don't know. But in today, a military organization is saying that we're just going to supply military. We don't care about civilian or anything in that kind of sense. Somebody said that people will lose their mind. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Or civilians are not human or something like that. I mean, obviously that could be, said in more political way. Like, we only have limited supply right now. We are working on more, but right now we only have limited supply. We have to give it to troops because that's where the biggest issue lies. That's understandable. But if they just said, okay, we just made it for the troops and the, people, the staff of the military, because we are a military organization, that would be just people will lose their mind with that.
Williams labors over lung samples from hospitals and orphanages, trying to find whether Pfeiffer's exists in a majority of victims. And she finds it. Everywhere. She isolates a sample and proves antibodies can bind to it, further confirming it was the culprit. That done, she cultures vast quantities of Pfeiffer's, liter upon liter, then hands them off to Park, who rushes upstate to mass-produce vaccine at his farm. Deep down, researchers knew this was not good science. The process had been too fast. No one really knew whether Pfeiffer's caused the flu, and if, as some suspected, the culprit was a virus invisible to microscopes, these vaccines would do nothing. It was, one researcher said, like fighting a ghost. Still, it was worth trying.
Yeah, I mean, it might take years for proper vaccine research to be done, and you can't wait that. This is better than nothing.
There was a possibility they'd accidentally snare the disease-causing agent in their sample, and the horses would make antibodies for it. That was how the first rabies vaccine happened, after all.
Yeah.
In fact, one Rockefeller researcher counted on this, producing a vaccine that contained antibodies for every bacteria he could find, all mixed together, hoping that one would stop the disease. Even as they rolled out the vaccine, Surgeon General Gorgas cautioned it was experimental, and no one knew if it would work. And it didn't. Labs across the country produced dozens of vaccines, and none of them prevented flu.
Damn.
Because flu was, as some feared, an invisible virus. Yet despite that failure, medical science was not helpless. They could do little for patients killed directly by the flu, the ones that turned blue, but they could fight the opportunistic pneumonias that followed it. The anti-pneumonia vaccine in serum Avery had worked on during the earlier measles epidemic was effective and likely saved some people. Thousands of troops took it. On the surgical side, doctors developed a new procedure to enter the lungs and drain the sacs of pus that drowned patients.
Yeah.
Others used oxygen, X-ray.
I mean, if a virus, mimics the symptoms of, pneumonia, basically, and if pneumonia vaccine works, that's a great news because that's probably what the killer is, right? Our lungs. A virus attacks our lungs in that sense, and that is what the killer usually is. That's what kills most people. So if you can, take that out of the context, like, take the entire pneumonia part of the, disease out of it, then, virus will eventually, get out of your system. Your immune system will kick it out eventually. But what happens is before your immune system can kill the virus, your lungs die out, right? Your lungs get filled with pus. You can't breathe. Immune system probably trying to fight try to fight inside your lung, damages your lung in the process. So if there is a vaccine that, make sure that at least lungs are protected in some way, like at least the effects of pneumonia goes away, that will probably save some people.
And cardiac stimulants to support ailing victims. But nurses provided the most valuable care. There were too few doctors, too many patients, not enough medicine, and what treatments they had often took too long to administer en masse. Nurses, on the other hand, could keep patients hydrated, warm, and breathing comfortably. They could ease coughs and lower temperatures. And that kind of long-term care probably affected a patient's survival more than anything a doctor could do in the few minutes they had at each bedside.
Yeah.
Added to that, the Red Cross developed a system that predicted the flu's cycle of infection, when it would die down in one area and spring up in another, letting them deploy emergency teams of nurses before they were needed. But as everyone from city officials and the Red Cross responded to the crisis, there was one man who refused to do anything: President Wilson. When briefed about the deadly influenza outbreak, the one question on his mind was whether he should order the troop ships to continue ferrying soldiers to France. He did, and the flu kept killing.
Look, I like to say that what a piece of shit, Woodrow Wilson, right? I like to say that right now, but I probably won't, because in the end, World War I is going on. I mean, it's this season in the end, right? You would think that, oh, what a piece of shit. Why would he send troops and knowing they could infect them and die? But World War I is going on. I mean, it's hard decision every time if something like that is going on. So yeah. Right, people, that was the 1918 flu pandemic fighting the ghost by the channel Extra Credits. If you like my reaction, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the Rick Sandy. There's a link in the description. Check out the cards over different places, check out the cards, and I'll see you next time.